Oh, adjectives, why are you such a difficult one to tame? Okay, so let's do some reviewing before we describe some more stuff with adjectives. With the comparison as we learned, right, you can either use the mas or without mas. And this is what I mean, right? Mas is optional. This is what we talked about before. Um, mas, mas duol ang akong balay kay sa imoha. And then for the focus, you have to use the ang family of markers versus non-focus, you have to use the sa family of markers. And I put an asterisk there because it only works with the sa family of markers. It doesn't work with the og family of markers. And that's something that you can figure out on your own. And when you play around with it, you'll see why it doesn't work with the og family of markers. It has to work with the sa. So anything with the sa family of markers, it will work. And again, ang family markers, so you can, if you want to be more specific, you can. So I can say, duol si Miguel kay Kang Jose, right? It works that way too. And you, of course, mas is optional. And then the superlative, as we already know, right? It starts off with our focus, right? And the focus is going to be, again, the ang family of markers plus your adjective that's been modified, right? It's been modified by whatever, so any of those plus whatever, right? And this isn't an exhaustive list. It's just a list of just commonly used modifications to modify our adjective down here, and plus our non-focus marker, which again is the sa family of markers, right? Sa. And this I don't really need to go over. It's just a review. But the thing I do want to talk about is right here on the right. So adjective reduplication, right? If we want to describe adjectives by reduplicating, we can. And it actually makes it sound like you are a much more native speaker. It gives it a little more native speaker kind of feel, okay? A little more natural flow in conversation when you start reduplicating adjectives. Why? Well, three things, okay? It softens the adjective's meaning, right? It adds in a little kind of a cute feel to the adjective, so to speak, okay? And then you'll see through the examples. It diminutivizes the degree of the adjective's meaning, and you'll see again, and then I'll even explain some more stuff, right? And then lastly, it implies the meaning of somewhat plus the adjective, right? So in English, we can say, oh, it's somewhat good, somewhat bad, somewhat big, somewhat small. It has that kind of meaning in, implied meaning in the reduplicating of the adjectives. So here are our examples. All right. Lisud-lisud ang examen, right? So it means like, oh, the exam is somewhat hard. It was somewhat difficult. The exam is somewhat difficult. Lapok-lapok ang kalsada. The street is somewhat muddy. Okay, it's somewhat muddy. And this last one is basa-basa pang akong salug sa kusina sa bagyo kagabi, which means, you know, my the floor was still wet from last night, right? The floor is somewhat wet. It's somewhat wet, so I guess it has that meaning of, oh, be careful because it's somewhat wet, you might slip. It has that kind of meaning to it, and it diminutivizes the degree of it. So basa basa, it's not too wet, it's not little wet, it's just, oh, okay, it's just somewhat wet. I just want you to be careful because it's just somewhat wet, you know, just watch your step, kind of a deal, right? And then with the diminutivize, right, you can even add your own twist to it. So remember how we talked about diminutives with adjectives, right? Let's say the for example, the word gamay, which we can put we can put a diminutive in gamay for like gamating, right? Gamating gamati. Gamating gamati, right? I reduplicated it and I added a diminutive. It makes it sound a little more cuter, so to speak. So yeah, this is a really helpful thing you can use to soften your adjectives when you're describing. You can reduplicate it. You can even add your own diminutives and reduplicate it. So hopefully that can help you with describing your adjectives.